What is up, guys? I hope you're doing well. And so just kind of checking out all the different Fed websites. So I've been going through and looking around on, the actual regional reserve bank websites as well, not just the main Federal Reserve website, because each regional bank has their own. So I was messing around on the New York Fed's one, and I found out they have a blog. And so I went there, and they don't post very often, probably like once, maybe twice a month, but still. Um, this past one on the May 10th, so that would be almost a week ago, was about the refinance boom, basically of 2020 and 2021, where mortgage rates were so low. Um, so basically, let's just head straight into the screen share and see what's going on. Make sure I click on the right one. Um, and also because some of these blog posts are kind of zoomed out a lot, if you can see. So I'm going to see if how zooming in does for you guys. Let's see. I don't know if that's too much, and now if my head's blocking everything. I'll just scroll up. I'll try to keep in mind to keep it above my head on this one. Um, all right. So I found out that total household. Oh wow, we're starting off great already. Total household debt balances continued their upward climb in the first quarter of 2022 with an increase of 266 billion. This rise was primarily driven by a $250 billion increase in mortgage balances. So, a lot more mortgages. Mortgages, historically the largest form of household debt, now comprise 71% of outstanding household debt balances, up from 69% in the fourth quarter of 2019. And this is due to a high volume of new mortgage originations, which, from everything that I've been telling about or have been reading, researching about in terms of real estate and everything, was we're in a massive housing boom, at least in terms of prices. I think they even say later in this specific article, or I guess blog post, that housing prices on average have been up almost 20%. I think it said 19 something. So there, and then I highlighted this next portion in green, which kind of reinforces that topic, saying there has been an 8.4 trillion in new mortgage debt originated in the last 2 years, as a steady upward climb in purchase mortgages was accompanied by a historically large boom in mortgage refinances. So there's a lot more debt being taken out on mortgages, which in and of itself isn't, or I'm sorry, there's a large amount of debt taken out on real estate, would be correct. The mortgage is the debt. Um, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? We'll get into that in the next, I believe, in this post. There's another one in the pipeline also pertaining to real estate, so it might be on tomorrow's video as well. But anyways, mortgage originations. One thing I want to see and double check is 8.4 trillion. So I want to, what is M2 money supply right now? I guess I have to actually type it out. If it'll load. Is that 21 trillion? Where's the marker? This is in billions. So we're at just under 22 trillion at the moment, according to the Fed website, which means that that's what that's that's over a third of the money supply is new mortgage debt. Not saying they're the same thing. I'm just saying in terms of magnitude, that's a lot of money. Anyways, so mortgage originations were at 859 billion in the first quarter of 2022, a decline from the previous quarter and notably down from the high of 1.2 trillion reached in the second quarter of 2021. However, purchase and refinance mortgages have followed different trends since the last two business cycles, right? Which I guess kind of makes sense, with housing prices going up and then interest rates being historically very low, up until now, at least. Um, Basically, people were like hell. I talked to my dad about all about the interest rates and everything when he was about his mortgage on the house I basically grew up in, I guess. And he got it refinanced at a much lower interest rate for the same reason, and that's probably why refinancings have gone through the roof, right? Um, so yeah, right here, mortgage refinances surged in the last 2 years as many homeowners were able to take advantage of historically low interest rates. Um, yeah, so there's that. Here's a little graph showing it. So the blue line is refinances and the red line is purchases. You can see that in the past couple quarters, they're both declining, seemingly rapidly. I guess we'll see how that kind of tapers or continues downward or whatever it does in the next few quarters at least. And they get this data from Equifax, if I remember correctly. At least it says here, but yeah. And then let's see. So the first quarter of 2022 saw a decline, even accounting for seasonal patterns in purchases originations, as the volume was lower than the first quarter of 2021. And then this is for the below line, in which we see down here for the blue one. I'm sorry, the red one, the red line, how it's decreasing down at the end. And then as home prices have increased steeply during the past 2 years, this has increased as well. And this is talking about the blue line here, which is the average dollar amount for newly opened mortgages. And this is the chart below that I'll scroll to in a second. The people who are buying these houses are having to pay more for them. As we talked about earlier, home prices up almost 20%. And so we see that here with the amount of dollars they're actually having to pay is going up and up and up. So yeah, and then I'm just thinking about like the number of purchase originations, right? And so it relatively, I guess, I don't know how, I'm trying to think about how this is relative to like the numbers, like the dollars and thousands. And basically, all this data is supposed to kind of show that the refinance boom during the 2020 and 2021 was substantial, as we talked about with the amount of refinances due to historically low interest rates. But its peak was only half the number of loans being refinanced per quarter during the historically large 2003 mortgage refinance boom, which we can see on this first chart, I'm assuming, with the refinances being up here, where we have, we'll just say like $700 million dollars, which I mean in 2021, hold up, I want to double check myself. So the refinance boom was substantial, but at its peak was still only half the number of loans. Okay, number of loans being refinanced. This is the dollar amount up here. And so it was the same dollar amount relatively. I mean, like this one, this recent one was a little bit higher in the amount in terms of actual dollars, but it says the number of loans was actually half, which means that that's the people who were taking out these loans are borrowing at least twice as much money, right? Twice as much dollars, um, according to that. And kind of comparing this to the whole real estate crash in 2008. And I've heard this from a few sources, at least something relatively similar, where kind of showing how it's not the same dynamic as before, and how it's kind of people are freaking out thinking like it's going to be another subprime mortgage crisis, when that's not really the problem, at least as of right now. Um, it's not the same kind of, I guess, financial environment, so to speak, in terms like the mortgages, in terms of real estate and what we're talking about here. So, like what they say, mortgage debt has been rising much more slowly than home values. Okay. And then as above, the number of mortgages originated remains far lower than in the early part of the time series, which was early 2000s. And so it'll be right in there is the early part of the time series. Um, and they said this would be even lower if it was population adjusted. So I'd assume it's not. Um, and this is the part that I'm alluding to from the other sources. So, and finally, loans being originated now are going to higher credit score borrowers. More than 70% of mortgages originated in the last 2 years were borrowers with credit scores over 760, compared to 38% between 2003 and 2006. So that's double, almost double the percentage. Um, and the first name that pops to mind that I've heard like this specifically from, not the numbers, but the concept, I guess, the fact that it's not, the problem isn't subprime, it's more of a supply um demand problem in a way, where there's a lot of demand for it, obviously because people are buying them, and then supply, they're like there's the housing supply is historically low from my understanding. Um from I think I was listening to the same guy, Jason Hartman, his podcast, and I think it was his podcast, different podcasts, like different podcast episodes, I should say, where the one I'm thinking about now is he said, like, we would, in terms of historically low inventory, we'd have to have like a million houses or something come on the market to just get to our historical average, something like that. And then there was, in terms of this, he basically said this explicitly in terms of like not having how to word it. The problem isn't subprime. Like the people who are buying houses are credit worthy, so to speak. Um, and I'm pretty sure I remember him saying that, but obviously not a direct quote, but um, he's the first name that comes to mind, and because I'm pretty sure he said it. But anyways, so there's that. Um, Also, just kind of thinking about thing. What really threw me off with these, with the chart, right? Because this is in dollars, right? And we know, like, that for one, the prices aren't the same from 2003 to 2022. We know that. That's a pretty safe bet that the prices of the homes themselves. So I'm trying to kind of relay this on volume, which I guess is what we would see here. But this is, I guess maybe that makes sense, because I'm thinking with the previous stat to where there was the what 20, or I'm sorry, where there was twice as many homes for the 2003 refinances as there were from now, but the same, we'll just say the same dollar amount. Um, but you see the purchases are relatively the same level. And so that's the difference between the purchases and refinances. I'm just kind of thinking out loud, so to speak. And then you get stuff like this, to where you have dollars on the right for, this is for the blue curve, and then you have a count, in millions on the, I'm sorry, dollars on the left, and then the count on the right for the red curve. Um, so that is probably one of the things I really had to get used to, when I started going into more like finance macro stuff. Was they like to put two different axes, like y axes on graphs, and that's just, I know, I guess from my usual stuff of what I did in college with physics and everything was basically like it was one graph X and Y. I mean, sometimes we had it, but it wasn't as prevalent as I've noticed for this kind of stuff. Um, or if there were multiple axes, like more than two, is what I mean. Like we have here where there's, I'm just saying like X and two Y's. Um, it was like some form of surface or volume curve or something like that. Just depending on whatever you were doing. But I don't know. Yeah, I guess that's all I got for this one. Only three graphs. Never mind. Maybe it's not. This is basically just refinances. Yeah, this is where we see that that amount, right? So we have the count in now is like 1.5 million, whereas in 2003 it was 3.5 ish, somewhere in there. So yeah, it was double. Um, where the actual mean finance amount is basically went from, we'll say, like 160 up to almost doubled. So basically half the number of refinances, but at double the price relative to like 2003 ish, early 2000s. So it's, I guess it's not very surprising considering, I guess, kind of the macroeconomic environment that we've been seeing the past few years, especially in terms of like the inflation and everything else, which obviously this is going back to 2003, so we're talking about differences in 2 decades, not just 2 years. And so, but still, just some thoughts. Anyways, that's all I got for this one. So I hope you guys have a good night, and I'll see you on the next one.